about, my goodness, 3.5 years ago, I had like a major crash. I did not really understand at that time, like what was happening to me or what was going on.
Yeah.
I had had a baby and we moved across the country and I'd started a new job.
Right.
I was doing like some college courses, just a lot, just a lot. And then in between that, we had a, adoption situation, which I'm so honored to have been a part of that. But it was to make a very long story short, it just kind of, I was doing too much. I wasn't really taking good care of myself. And one day I just kind of woke up feeling just totally defeated in life and not like me at all, and just didn't really understand what was going on. It was a year and a half after my daughter was born. And so, but that
Mhm.
year and a half up to that point had just been nuts. I'd gotten sick multiple times. um I wasn't, I mean, looking back you realize how crazy it was, right? But when you're in the middle
Right.
of it, you just don't realize how crazy it is. You're just doing
Right.
life as you normally would.
Yep.
um and so, I had gone to the doctor and he just thought I was actually emotional and pregnant. And he was just doing what he knew to do.
Yeah.
um and so he's like, I'm just gonna, run some lab work on you and have you do pregnancy tests. And I wanted to like punch him because I'm like, I'm not pregnant, like this is not pregnancy. Like
Right.
something is wrong with me. And so anyway, to make a long story short, the test came back normal. I wasn't pregnant. And I was really, really frustrated because
Right.
I'm like, I didn't get any answers. And so fast forward, I mean, I went through just different practices. I went to a clinic that actually specializes in women's hormones.
Yeah.
And the lady who did the intake, um, because to make a very long story short, I had to just start doing research and figuring out, like, I kind of had to be
Right.
my own advocate and figure out, like, okay, what is wrong with me? Like, you don't just like wake up one day and feel like you're going bananas. Like,
Right.
what's going on? Um, and so, anyway, she, was kind, but she said, you really don't qualify for a patient that we could work with because you're just too young to be having like hormonal imbalances.
And how
And
old were you
yeah,
at the time?
I was 29.
You're too
I
young
was,
to have hormone imbalances?
yeah, yeah. I was 29. Yeah, so I'm 31 now. And so this all started when I was right before my 28th birthday. And so I had honestly been in it for a while. And so I left
Yeah.
there just feeling really discouraged because I'm like, okay, like, I'm trying to figure this out.
Right.
Um, and then, yeah, and then I just gone to a few other doctors that were just kind of like, just not really aggressive at helping me find a plan. So, like, I would spend all this money on expensive tests,
Right.
and they'd look at them and say, oh, okay, well, um, I remember I had one doctor, there was one hormone that was reading really low. He's like, well, you just don't need to worry about that one. And I was like, but why did I spend all this money on this test? Like, if we're not even going to address this. So, needless to say, it has
Frustration
been a
level was like up here.
up to
Yeah.
here, up to here. And so, I stumbled into your program. Actually, it was because, Facebook gets algorithms. And so it's going to
Right.
figure out what you're researching. It's going to pop it in front of you in your feed. And so there was just this little blog about like anxiety and hormones. I was like, okay. So I clicked on it and just kind
Mhm.
of read it through. I'm like, well, that was great. And I mean, if anybody out there who's done research, you kind of read a blog and then you just kind of move on.
Right.
Um, and so I think I had signed up to receive like a stress reducing, it was something I logged
Right.
on to receive, I put my info in. And so then, of course, it picks up the algorithms. And so it kept putting your stuff in front of me.
Yeah.
Um, and again, just because I had been failed so many times by the medical field, I just didn't really look into it hardcore because I'm like,
Yeah.
I just don't need another thing to disappoint me because I just felt like I'd been disappointed so many times. Um, and so uh, then there was a post that caught my eye that you did because I was having all these issues. So in your post, you were talking about your gut and your brain and your hormones causing your serotonin to drop. And so it's just very educational. And I remember kind of like, okay, that kind of made me do a double take because I'd had all of these separate issues. I had gut issues. I'd had hormone issues. I'd had like major mood issues.
Right.
And I couldn't find anybody that would address all three.
Right.
You know, like you'd find somebody like, and when I tell you I've spent thousands of dollars, like I had spent thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
And so I, you know, had somebody work with me, but all they addressed was like just gut stuff. And then they put me on this horrific diet where I literally like ate like a bird, and it was awful. And I felt worse than before. And, you know, so,
yeah.
but I remember, you seem to have a really holistic knowledge of the human body, of the gut, the brain, the hormones, all of it. And so that's when I began to inquire. I'm like, okay, like this girl knows a little bit more.
Maybe I can test this out a little bit and
yeah,
see.
Maybe. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Well,
that's
because
right.
this is one of the things I really wanted to touch on was when most of the time when women find me, and I was in this position, so I very much relate to it. I remember exactly what it felt like to be pushed aside, basically. Like, I'm a medical professional. I know my body, you know, and I should have been like, if you think about, people think, oh, you have credentials, they would listen to you. They don't, because they're not tuning into, like, my lab tests aren't showing anything, and I still feel awful. And I was 26 at the time. So again, very similar thing where it's like, oh, you're too young. It's, baby's too old for you to have postpartum. You're too young to have a hormone imbalance. And I'm like, but clearly my body is telling you something different. Yeah. And so how did the skepticism is real, is what I'm saying. And fear of failure is real. And the fear of trusting somebody again and being disappointed is so real. And it's so valid. And I think sometimes we discount how painful those experiences are and how much it disconnects us from our own experience, because we're like, I'm telling you about my experience and you're telling me that it's wrong. And so you kind of lose this trust in yourself and the medical system. So what kind of, and I remember that we had talked about this on one of our phone calls. I can't remember exactly which one. What helped you to kind of take the leap or realize that that it was okay to trust again? Like, what kind of helped you to bridge that gap?
Oh man. Well, I definitely think so. It was a combination. It was me. And then it was also like my husband. Like, I had to get him on board because we had spent like thousands of dollars that we quite frankly did not have. Yeah. So I could feel better, and I wasn't feeling better. And so like, I think particularly for me, because it's like you spend this time, you book these appointments, the doctor kind of swoops in and they swoop back out. And it's like, you have kind of like, you've prepared yourself for this appointment. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you're ready with your questions, and it's like, they rush in and they rush out. Right. And so like, you don't feel heard, you don't feel supported. Exactly. You really don't feel like you're really cared for necessarily. And so I think for me, there were a couple of things. I think for me particularly, like, I think trust is a really important thing. Yep. And I'm not here to like bash every healthcare professional that ever, that ever worked with me, but I just did not sense the diligence on their end to really try to help me figure out a solution. Right. And so I think like what did it for me was that, with you, particularly with you, I really, you kind of earned my trust, just because like I had trust issues but I knew something needed. Yeah. And so, and I knew something needed to change. Right. And so, like I'd mentioned, I just think realizing like you had this extensive knowledge of the human body. I think I told you this, like I stalked your website to just kind of like see what all you would talk about.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so, no, I mean, I would say for me, like what helped me make the leap, one was I was just tired of feeling bad, and I knew I had to do something. Like I just could not keep functioning the way I was functioning. Right. But also I just think, there was this trust that was developed early on before I started working with you.
Yeah.
You seemed to genuinely care about the questions that I had. You seemed to genuinely care about me feeling better. And so that was a big deal for me. You were willing to like kind of like go to my husband with me. Not like in a sense of like, hey, let's gang up on my husband and,
No,
get him to
no,
buy
no.
into this.
Yeah.
It was a sense of like, hey, like, I've been doing this for a long time. I understand these issues. Like, how can we help like figure this thing out? And
Right.
so,
And I think that also brings up a really good point, because a lot of times, and I think we talked about this in some way, shape, or form on your call, that a lot of times we're going through it, but our spouses too, because they've either watched us suffer
mm-hmm.
and don't really understand why. And so they can't help you. And so then they're feeling helpless, and they're investing their money and their time, and or whatever that looks like for your individual situation. And at no point ever, like in this process, do I want anybody, like any party involved, to feel like they were swindled into something, right? Like,
Right.
and so I'm like, we have to address these concerns honestly. And the honest concern wasn't really even about finances. It was, are you going to help my wife get better? And like, are
Yeah.
you as invested in this as I am?
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that is very much missing from our healthcare system. And for me, it's just as important that the spouse knows that they can trust me as it is that, that the woman that I'm working with knows they can trust me. And so, and having those conversations and, making sure the spouse, your husband knows even how you feel, because a lot of times, I know for myself, I'd been suffering for such a long time that I didn't want to talk about it anymore, because I didn't want to be a burden, and I was tired of this problem not being fixed, and I was tired of my husband and my daughter paying